It is now time to experience the buzz, a podcast that takes an inside look at amazing people doing amazing things. Get ready for some great conversation that will be fascinating, educational, and inspiring. We will also leave room to help small businesses in a big way. Now, here's your host, entrepreneur Steve Buzzard.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Experience the Buzz. I'm your host, Steve Buzzard. So glad to be with you as we say goodbye to the year 2022. It is our final episode. We mark it as number 107. Hard to believe that in a month, when we turn the page to the new year, it'll be 2 years of ETB. And of course, want to thank each and every one of you for being a part of the audience, whether you're a subscriber or you just tune in occasionally. It's been a fun journey. So episode number 107 is going to feature a young gentleman named Jon Root. And he is part of the Turning Point USA network, where he has his own show called Breakaway, which basically is termed as non-woke sports talk and conversation. The emphasis on conversation. I'm very excited about this conversation because Jon Root, our connection actually goes back to his days at Azusa Pacific, where my oldest son, Toph, attended, and he's a big A's fan. And going back to 2012, he played a character called the Pie Guy when the A's were walking off at the snap of a finger and had their magical run in 2012. He played a character, and really, this is what Jon Root is. He is very energetic. He is able to get into the crowds. The other big job that he had is he was kind of the hype man for the San Jose Sharks. He did that for a period of 5 years, and in fact was the youngest to get into that position in the NHL. But right now, all his focus is on the show Breakaway and his work with Turning Point USA. He He has conversations and is not afraid to speak out on a lot of subjects that are going on, mostly in regards to sports, right? I think you and I would agree that when we watch sports or attend sports, we are there to get away from something, right? We're there to root for our team. And when politicization, wow, that's a tough word to say, comes into play, you know what? You just kind of go, I don't want that, right? I just want to enjoy the game and see my team win. So anyways, Jon really attacks subjects that have to do with this, whether it be, organizations as a whole, the NFL, Major League Baseball, NBA, or it could just be subjects like Leah Thomas. Should women or trans gender athletes be able to compete in women's sports? That's a big topic of debate. But here's the key. The key is conversation, right? And I've really been thinking about this and actually praying about it, is that we need to have more conversation. I think it's, I'm not the first person to say that, but I was hoping, as I was kind of getting ready for the new year and we start kind of making our goals for what's going to come up in 2023. And, I've been very proud of what we've been able to put forth and being able to tell people's stories. And that's what we're going to do today with Jon Root. Like, how did he get to this spot at such a young age? And it's pretty cool. He's got a great story to tell. But within this opening, I just want to say, it's time to have more conversation. And I'm hoping to kind of go that direction a little bit more in 2023 with the guests that we have on this program. Again, I look at everybody and it is very clear to me that everybody has a story. Okay. And I know that's a big intro. And of course, what we need to do is we need to talk more about what is going to go on with Jon and what this conversation is all about. But we also have to get to a part what is called What's the Buzz? All right. So again, we've taken a 3-week hiatus. That was very difficult for me, I have to admit, because I had never gone without 2 weeks of having a conversation or an episode that we put out. So I appreciate you guys hanging in there. The beauty of the podcast, though, is that it lives forever, right? We have 106 episodes, and I hope if you are jumping in and you're just seeing what Experience the Buzz is all about, that you go back in the archives, especially if you're from Sacramento. I mean, the personalities that we have been able to talk to have been just top shelf. And of course, that's going to continue on into 2023. And I really hope you enjoy the show. And you can get it two ways. You can get it, obviously, if you're a big podcast person, we're on all the formats. So it would be Apple, it would be Spotify, Google would be the three mains. Or you can just go to my website at buzzardball.com, go to the section where I have the podcast, and you can listen from there. So many ways you can do that. The other piece of this is that we we have a YouTube channel. Again, all you have to do, Experience the Buzz inside of YouTube. Boom, we'll be right there, and you'll be able to check us out. Now, let's get back to our guest. Again, it is Jon Root, episode number 107. I've given you the build-up. Why waste any more time? Enjoy the conversation. All right, welcome in. It is Experience the Buzz. I'm your host, Steve Buzzard, and this is episode 107. And this ends the year 2022, and I'm very excited to bring on our guest. His name is Jon Root. So who's Jon Root? Well, he's the Turning Point USA contributor, producer, and the daily host of TPUSA. Now, you may say, I have no idea what that is. You may not, but there may be some of you that do. And he's got an incredible show called Breakaway, which basically is termed this way: non-woke sports talk and conversation. So bringing those worlds together, which is super awesome. And I love it for the sense that I love sports, and I used to be a sports talk host. So this is a very unique way to kind of bring the sports world to people in a way that maybe, I look at education. It's an education process. So Jon is with us, and he's got an incredible story that's led him to this point. And first and foremost, we got to welcome the man. Jon, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be the final guest of the year. Wow.
Let's go. That's right. We're going to close out 2022. And it's interesting, Jon, because in my open, I had said something about, just the word conversation. Because we're going to do a deep dive, and you've covered so many subjects with what you are doing right now, and we're going to find out how you got there and stuff. But I think this is important. It's actually something I prayed over, right? Because I had to admit, I had a little PTSD in terms of just things that I went through personally when it came to COVID and things that were going on. And so I prayed about it, and I feel at peace. I'm like, okay, this is just going to be a great conversation, and that's the key. It's a conversation. So for the people out there that maybe don't know who you are, just talk about what you currently do. I kind of gave that surface view. Maybe you can give us a little bit more of a deep dive of what you do.
So it's definitely been a totally wild ride. And I mean, first and foremost, I stand for Jesus Christ. That's my foundation. Does that mean that I do everything perfectly? Does that mean that people are going to like the type of Christian that I am? No, definitely not. But I love sports. There was a reason I worked in sports and decided that was going to be my career path, because it was a separation away from politics, separation away from the craziness of life. It was an outlet away from all that nuts stuff. It brought people together, or at least used to. And then I got to a point where I realized I couldn't talk about certain things. I couldn't like certain stuff on social media. I couldn't share certain things because, for people that don't know me, I played football at Azusa Pacific University, where your son went.
APU?
APU, baby. No longer, they've been undefeated for years now. That's because they don't have a football program anymore. And that hits me hard. But
yeah, that's tough.
Played football there, and then I know your son and I, we did some radio broadcasts together. So I did baseball, basketball, volleyball, everything in between. I interned at NBC Sports, and then I ended up getting a job with the San Jose Sharks, and then I worked for the Santa Cruz Warriors at the same time. Did some work with NBC Sports in the Bay Area. I was well on my way moving up to the network level, because I always wanted to be a reporter, a host. I wanted to be that Sports Center anchor type of guy. I remember watching Dream Job when I was a kid. And I was like, this is what I want. This is fun. Sports are fun. And then I really saw a few things start to move in a way that was very far left politically. So when people say, oh, there's so much politics in sports, when you're standing up for the anthem, you're singing the national anthem, you're talking about love for your country, that's not political at all. Right. I don't know why people have started to conflate those things, but sports used to be an incredible outlet. We had Hockey is Forever 1 month in San Jose and around the league. And somebody that was able to drop the puck was a biological female that came out as a male and was still playing on the Junior Sharks female team. And it turned out to be this whole trans inclusion night. And then Hockey is Forever 1 night turned into basically a Pride Night in disguise. And that was elevated to this place of you can choose your own gender. Diversity, equity, and inclusion started making their way into sports. And then I was like, man, I could talk about my faith, but man, am I going to be able to say anything about my view on traditional marriage? Am I going to be able to say anything about how I feel like these trans kids need to know the truth, that you can't just decide your own gender, and that is extremely dangerous, and that you have big pharma, you have hospitals and elites that are trying to just take advantage of this gender dysphoria that kids are going through. And I know this might make people squirmy just even talking about this, but
Sure.
it's my life now. And I think it needs to be talked about, give people the truth. And I was just trying to understand, why is this stuff being elevated? And there's no conversation. We go back to conversation. You cannot say anything from the other side. Because for me, I feel like the best way to love people is to give them the truth. That doesn't mean just beating them down with it. That doesn't mean that I go up
Right.
to that girl and say, like, I can't believe you would make a decision like this, or I'm not going to like berate her parents or anything like that. But I'm like, man, my heart hurts. And then it got to a point where the pandemic hit. Everything was political.
Yeah.
Everything's just like, get the vaccine, wear a mask. Nobody can show up to games anymore. We got to just go with these leftist talking points. You have anything to say conservative, you're getting kicked out of ESPN. You're getting kicked off of these teams and these leagues. And then it got to a point where I didn't have any work left. And then I ended up, long story short, I know this is a very, very long answer, and we're getting into a little bit more of my story.
I like long answers. Keep it going.
It's everyone's like, I didn't know I was getting into Joe Rogan podcast right now. Don't worry, it's not gonna be 3 hours. But I was still doing a little bit of work with the Santa Cruz Warriors. San Jose Sharks ended up letting me go, and then I still had my foot in the door with sports. And I was working for a company called Fanatics. A lot of people probably heard of Fanatics, major merchandiser. Anytime you want to get a shirt, a jacket, a jersey, anything sports related to your team, the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, all these leagues, I was hosting a live show for them, and I've had a relationship with them for years. So they decided to take their exclusive events and move them online. And I hosted a few shows for them. And then I went to the gym without a mask one day. And this was over a year after the pandemic hit. And I moved out to Arizona. I was living in the Bay Area, time to get the heck out of there. And then I posted a photo. And it wasn't a photo that said, oh, the vaccine is fake and got 5G in it. It wasn't like COVID is not real. It wasn't like anybody that wears a mask is an idiot. None of that. It just said, thank God that I get to live in a place where I get to decide for myself. God bless Arizona. God bless freedom. It just blew up. Fanatics called me a couple days later and gave me the runaround and said, I'm not hosting the next show. Then I'm going to be on the bench for potential shows in the future. So they basically let me go without letting me go. And I tried to get an answer out of
talent aside, everything aside, you're on the bench.
Exactly. And then they said, like, you're not going to be hosting some shows like in the future. We're going to keep you in mind. I was like, so this has nothing to do with talent, because you told me the last few shows have been some of the best you guys have had. You tried to say that I wasn't properly vetted. We've had a relationship for years. You said the decision's not made by you. It's made by a higher up. I'm like, let's get the higher up on the phone. I'm happy to talk. And then it got to this point where, like, I am sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, I don't care if I'm losing everything I built, because, man, I worked really, really hard, Steve, to get to where I was at. And then I realized that I got to this point where I was like, I felt like I was a few feet away from getting to that network level, a few feet away to getting to my dream. And then God had other plans. And then that's when I joined TV USA. I was able to build out a couple shows with them. Now I'm doing a lot of sports stuff individually. I had a show called Breakaway. We had like Jonathan Isaac on, Brian Urlacher, Ennis Cantor. Like Ennis Cantor, that was one of like the first long form discussions he had. And that's when he was still playing in the NBA. So I was able to have a lot of these conversations that you don't really hear anywhere else, because you're only hearing one side of the argument from ESPN or any of these other major outlets at all. So that's a long synopsis of my story leading to where we are now.
Wow. I mean, just, and the thing is so there's so much to unpack there, because I imagine along the way there were so many of those moments. And the thing that is parallel between you and I is, I too, when I was your age, that I wanted to be that guy. I was like, Sports Center, shoot for the top. I wanted to be a play-by-play announcer, settled here in Sacramento. Didn't happen because Gary Gerald is still the voice of the Sacramento Kings. So, that wasn't going to happen. Grant Napier, and we can talk about that, right? Grant Napier was the voice of the Sacramento Kings, and because of one tweet that was taken way out of context, he gets sent to Florida, and I don't want to say his life is ruined, but essentially I know something he loved was dramatically changed. So, you just take things like that. And then for me, I love that you said that God had other plans, because that's the way I looked at it. It's like when I finished with the Kings, which was a phone call of Steve, and I didn't know who the voice was. We want to go a different direction. Okay, what's that direction? Couldn't tell me. Didn't know what was going on. There was no rhyme or reason for it happening. Now, I understood that was part of the business, but for me, it was like, wow. And I have to admit, I was bitter for probably a couple years. I was the biggest Dallas Mavericks and Minnesota Timberwolves fan, because at that time in early 2000s, that's who they were playing in the Western Conference Finals. But I was able to get over that and realize, okay, God is just steering me a different way. And that's obviously what he was doing for you then. But, you're young, right? And you're in it, and you're trying to get to this spot, and you're really getting thrown off. And that had to be tough. Like within those spots, can you talk about that? Was there bitterness? Was there anger? Or were you able to take that and say, okay, God is trying to do something here. Let me look at this and see how I can shift it. Because it seemed like you were going through just like waves of things up and down and all around.
Oh, I'm going to be completely honest. I was very angry. I was extremely upset, not with God, I think with other people, with the circumstances, and there was a lot of questioning of God, but I feel like I needed to turn the why God into how God. So the explanation of that is not, God, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Blah, 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 blah. It's like, God, how are you going to use this for your good? And because obviously I had my own plans, and these plans had been formulated for a decade, a long, long time. And then, man, I got to a point where I realized I found a lot of my identity in what I did. I didn't think I did. It didn't consume me, but man, like every time I went out to eat, I went anywhere in San Jose, like people knew me. It's like, oh, dude, you're the Sharks guy, or I saw you at the Santa Cruz Warriors game. And for me, I felt like it was a good outlet for these teams, because they don't get access to players or coaches or any of the most of the people in the front office. And not saying that I'm on that level at all, but people saw that and it's like, oh, dude, you're hanging out with Brent Burns, or you were just doing something with Jordan Poole, this, that, or the other thing. And it was fun. But I got to this point where I was like, holy smokes, what am I going to do? And man, I went through a lot of analysis paralysis. Now, if people look at my social media, they're like, oh, it looks like you got like a little bit of a following now. It seems like you really know how to do this content creation thing. Like, man, no. I did not want to jump in front of a camera, just have like a selfie video, because I just didn't feel like it looked good. Like everything I did was very highly produced, well thought out. Not saying that my videos aren't well thought out now, but there was a big production about building out my own YouTube or my own social media channels, that I was like, I just don't know if I have the right cameras. I don't have the right lighting. I don't know. It's what a lot of people do. And I think I just decided I need to get to this point where, like, dude, the truth will make waves. That's it. That's all I need to do. And I didn't really care about social media too much, because I just felt like, I was provided an amazing platform with these teams and doing a little bit of work with NBC Sports. I did a little bit of acting as well. But I got to this point where it's like, all right, your identity's in Christ. It's okay to be upset. There can be some righteous anger at times, but like, how do you turn that anger or that discomfort and turn that into energy that is good? And I had to have a lot of friends that came up to me and said, like, dude, you are down and out, but you need to keep grinding. You need to start reading the Bible more. You need to continue to go to church, keep being a light, and God's going to provide. And that's when, like, I was just at a coffee shop one day, and I ended up seeing a opening for Turning Point USA, who I'd been following for a long time. I had no idea they were in Phoenix, Arizona. So I was in Phoenix for almost like 6 months.
That's God.
Yeah, it was a total God thing. But I knew for me at that time, I was like, all right, it would be nice to have a full-time job, because obviously TV USA was going to be open. They didn't take any PPE money. They didn't make people wear masks. or anything like that. Like they're open. I was like, you know what, I really align with these guys, but I'm just going to be a producer. That's it. And then this was probably, yeah, this was late 2020
And so,
or
John, you were
2021.
willing to, at that point, take a step back, correct? Because, like you said, you had done all the work where you could apply for something where you could be on camera, you could be a talent. But in this case, with what you were going through, you had to take that step back and say, okay, let me just kind of see what's going on and then, see what happens from there. Am I correct in that assessment?
Pretty much, but I wasn't going to be jumping on camera for Turning Point USA right away.
Right,
So for
right.
me, I was like, I still have my foot in the door with sports. I had some great connections, some awesome mentors. I definitely have some people that you know I could still talk to, because at this point when I was applying for Turning Point, this was before I got canceled and everything. So I was talking to Fanatics a little bit too. So I was like, okay, I need a full-time job, but I can kind of work undercover, because I was like, it is basically a death wish to say I am conservative, to come out with conservative ideas in the sports realm. Just even read Clay Travis's book, Republicans Buy Sneakers Too. The media is so left leaning, and I used to be able to have conversations with people that were very left leaning politically, and people that there's a lot of like ungodliness in sports as well, but there's also a lot of great people. But in the grand scheme of things, the majority people that don't align with you and I at all. So I worked
Yeah.
for Turning Point for 6 months without telling a soul publicly. And that's when I worked for Fanatics. And that's when I was trying to still keep the conversations going with sports. And then once I got canceled, I'm like, all right, no one will touch me anymore. I had some auditions with a sports team out in Arizona. They decided not to hire me because of my connection with Turning Point and the stuff that I share online. Like, I was basically
Wow.
blackballed. There's no way that I
Wow.
was going to get a job. I won't get a job anymore in any sports league for any team at any time. They just I don't align with them, and I think at this point it's okay. And then that's when I decided, I was like, all right, let's start a sports show. I'm happy to do TPUSA Live, host that daily, both those shows. Decided to move on from, and I decided to move a little bit more of my time into TPUSA Faith, our Christian department we have at Turning Point USA, and then I cover a lot of sports on my own. But definitely the identity aspect, I was mad, just like a lot of people are. A lot of people lost their jobs. So like my story's not anything crazy, but how do you turn something crappy into something good, and then also trust
Right.
God throughout the process, because He did immensely more than I could ever imagine.
Yeah. And John, by the way, I mean, it's a story. And that's the thing. And that's why I think these types of conversations have to take place, because I remember the one thing during the pandemic that I kept saying to myself and to my wife, Kristen, it's like, everybody could do their own documentary through all this,
Yeah.
because I couldn't even imagine what the stories are from everyone. And no matter where you're at, that's the thing. It's like, it's just been so incredible what we've been able to kind of discover. And it's heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking to me, because the conversation piece really has gone out the window. Now, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to still encourage it. And I'm hoping, like with this platform, with the podcast, being able to do that. And you're kind of a catalyst for this, because yes, I'm telling everybody's story that comes on this program. But this one, I think, just goes a little bit deeper, because I think we have to kind of, we got to put some cracks in this. Because like you just said, in your mind, you feel like you cannot get hired for any sports organization. And to me, that's just not right. That's just sad to me that would be the case. And just doesn't seem fair. But on the flip side, you've done something with it. You're saying, you know what? I'm still going to have my love for sports. It's just going to look a little bit different. And that leads to my question: was the breakaway idea, was that your idea? And did TPUSA do something? Are they sports, or was it something else? Was that your idea to kind of bring that piece to the table?
That was 100% my idea.
That's
So,
awesome.
because the only person that was really covering the other side of the conversation, again, when we bring up conversation, was Clay Travis. And then maybe like Jason
Yeah.
Whitlock. I know they teamed up for a hot minute and then had a fallout. But, Outkick the Coverage was the only place that was really
Interesting.
giving you the other side of the argument. And I also didn't really see a lot of people online, like younger sports media professionals, talk about the other side of the argument. So when we talk about the Mizzou hunger strike, I don't know if anybody remembers that. There was a lot of people
That's
that said
right.
that there was like racial slurs here, and then somebody left like a poop swastika in a bathroom, and everything was hearsay, and they tried to say there was racism running rampant on Mizzou, and then there was like a threat from the Mizzou football team that they might not want to play, but like no journalist was actually doing the work. And then they found out that like all these allegations were false. It was all fabricated racism. And then when you talk about the COVID conversation, um, nobody was covering like, is this the right thing to do to push medical tyranny on everybody, to lock people in their homes, um, to make sports unbelievably political? Why are we aligning with Black Lives Matter, the organization? Like, is that actually doing any good? And then look at what happened. The Twitter files have revealed everything that we thought about censorship when it came to the vaccine, when it came to ivermectin, when it came to anything of that sort. BLM ended up stealing millions and millions of dollars from people. They wanted to destroy the nuclear family. Like all these things that sports teams and leagues and players were aligning with were unbelievably leftist. They were things that were creating a lot more division than help. So I know for me, I was realizing, okay, let's actually have a program. I needed to abide by some of the YouTube rules. I couldn't say COVID. I couldn't say ivermectin. I couldn't say like, it was crazy the hoops that I had to jump through.
Yeah.
But I was like, we need to have an outlet. And in general, I feel like we did some good things. And it didn't fully form into what I would really like, but I think it provided a lot of awesome conversations. And I think it's an uphill battle with conservatives too, because conservatives, their outrage culture can almost be just as bad as the left's cancel culture, because
Yes.
there's
Yes.
people, and I'm
Absolutely.
happy to call that out.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of conservatives that try to talk about sports and they sound like absolute imbeciles. Like LeBron James is one of the greatest athletes we'll ever see in our lives. You don't need to attack
Man.
his athletic ability, attack his political
Right.
points, and attack the fact that he hasn't gotten past the second page of a book ever in any photograph online. So, like, and then
But that's what gets murky. That's what gets murky is because I had to admit I'm tainted on LeBron
yeah,
James because of the way not only that he spoke out, but the way he spoke out. And the biggest thing for me goes back to, and listen, you can attest to this. Go back to your classes that you took for media and communications in college. And for me, I went to USC, graduated in '91, and I remember George Ramos, a Pulitzer Prize writer for the LA Times, and his big thing was, make sure that you tell the truth and make sure that you check your sources and don't publish anything unless it's 100% viable. It's truth. You're not making anything up. You're not an editorial. You're not doing any of that. And that's the thing that gets hard for me. And we've seen it. And there's been proof that some of the comments that unfortunately LeBron has come out, he was totally off the mark because he simply just didn't do the education part, the looking into things. You just mentioned Mizzou. There was no one there to report the actual truth. So what do? You throw things out there, and then that's how rumors spread. And so that's getting down a rabbit hole. But you know what I mean? It was that for me has kind of tainted the LeBron James, and where I go, yeah, Michael Jordan's still the best.
the MJ will always be the best. I think LeBron definitely deserves a lot of credit for his longevity, and I mean the guy works
Absolutely, yes.
really hard on his body. He spends a lot of money on it. Like the Lakers are trash right now, and I love to see it. But in general, I think there was an uphill battle with conservatives because they don't know how to talk about sports. So when you had someone like Clay Travis and Jason Whitlock come along, it was like, oh, so it's someone that can actually give me a good cultural or political take and be able to analyze what's going on with sports and the athletic
Right.
side of everything. And then that's where I was noticing with TPUSA, there's a lot of people, and when I say outrage culture, they're like, why do you even watch this stuff anymore? I can't believe you'd support this. It's just like, no, this is an aspect of culture we got to fight for, because I can't stand the people that say like, I don't like that, so I'm not gonna fight for it. I don't like the politics in sports. So it's like, sure, don't buy the jerseys, don't buy the tickets, don't watch at times, but probably still figure out a way to be vocal, figure out a way to have conversations with people that can make decisions in these leagues or for these teams, or have these athletes speak out on stuff, so we can get this outlet to be unifying again. Because if you just decide, hey, sports. I can't stand them. And then you're going to complain in a decade that they become so far left. You are the problem. So that's the issue I was coming up with, like conservatives. It's just like there's a way we can fight for something, but not fully support what they stand for. And I think that people didn't have enough of those conversations, because sports should be fought for, and it's not just about professional sports. What was the best sport we had out there, the least woke? It was probably the UFC and college football. And then who brought college football back? A lot of people, this is not an endorsement of Trump as a whole, but he helped bring college football back. I think he had a great understanding that, like, we need college football. These kids need college football. America needs college football. There was like tens of thousands of people that packed it, hundreds of thousands of people that packed in these stadiums, and people were just like, this is awesome. It's sports. When I could just watch sports without the political nonsense, and sports should be fought for. I hope people understand that. And that's a huge part of my platform. It's like, I will be unafraid to say what I think. I want it to be rooted in truth. I'm happy to be proven wrong at times, but at least there's a discussion being had.
Yeah. And folks, what if I told you this was just the opening segment? That's right. We've got two more. Reset. This is Jon Root. He is from Sacramento. He actually went to Oro High School. And the reason I brought him on is just the work that he's doing at Turning Point USA. He's got this show called Breakaway. Again, it's talking about sports on the non-woke side. Okay, just using that word woke. Oh, man, so amazing how that word is just kind of blown up and everything. Mm-hmm. But here's the deal. You're hearing, I'm hoping as a listener, as a viewer, that you are really listening just to this conversation, because I think Jon really hit it. It's like, it's not that Jon's trying to make his point, right? But what it is that we are trying to get to a place where all voices can be heard, and we can get to a unification, get back to especially what sports was. And we all know what it was, and it doesn't have to be any different than that. We know that when you take sports at its root, no pun intended, is that it is a unifier, and it is an escape for each and every one of us to root for our teams, to get away from the madness of the world, to celebrate, right? That's what sports is. So when we come back on the flip side, more about Breakaway, and then we're going to dive back because there's some notes here. Let's see. The work that Jon did at APU, not only on the radio side, because that's kind of what he wanted to do. He was a big part of the cheering section for Azusa Pacific, and you may not think that's a big deal, but it was a pretty big deal at the zoo. He was also a Love is Blind contestant. I got to get into that. And then we've got to talk about his days as the pie guy for the Oakland A's back in that great year of 2012. We'll take a break and come back with more right here at Jon Root on Experience the Buzz. Don't go anywhere. Well, I hope you enjoyed that segment. It is now time to talk about our sponsors, the big three. That's right. I know we lost one, but when I say we lose one, it's okay. Let's try that again. I need to silence my cell phone. That's so funny. News alert. Okay, let's try it again on the count. 3, 2, 1. Well, I hope you enjoyed that segment there, and then we got more to come here on Experience the Buzz, as we always do. You got to have a little break in the action, right? And that, of course, is our time, my time, to tell you about 3 amazing sponsors, R5 Stitch and Print, Pit Boss Jerky, and Little Whale Swim School. They are on board great small businesses right here in the Sacramento area, starting with R5 Stitch and Print. Their owner, Troy Rousey, featured here on ETB in episode number 25. You can find them at r5print.com or call them at 916-454-3773. What do? Well, they specialize in screen printing and embroidery, featuring high precision stitching and large format printing. That is the key to R5 success. They also will design and create a portfolio with virtual mock-ups for you to choose from, and which I like because I'm a visual person, like to see things, and then you can kind of point things out and away you go. Also, don't forget, they have a in-house graphic designer that will take very good care of you. Okay, so that's R5 Stitch and Print. Also want to thank Pit Boss Jerky. Joe Green featured in episode number 26, 12 amazing flavors, And the 12th flavor is Experience the Buzz, which is named right after the show. And right now, Joe Green is featured in a couple places. This is very exciting. We mentioned the incredible flavors, and we'll get to some more of them, but they are now featured at Amy Hardware, 3 locations. There's 2 here in Sacramento, and the newest that just opened up in El Dorado Hills, so check them out there. I'm just going to run off the flavors for you. Pepper garlic, Pit Boss Original, Sweet Summer, Honey Gold, Sweet and Smoky, Little Heat, Urban Smoke, Big Heat, Keto Mix. Then you got Raspberry Apple Chipotle, which is one of my favorites until ETB came around. And a very popular attraction is Island Teriyaki. Again, that's Joe Green, episode 26. You're like, how do I get some? Do I have to go to Amy Hardware? That would be one way. Or you can order through the order board. And that number is 916-769-6807. And that number actually gets you in direct contact with Joe Green, and he'll make sure that he takes special care of you. Of course, tell him the podcast sent you. And finally, Little Whale Swim School. I know it's cold outside, but here's the beauty. Premier Swim School in Sacramento, because it's always summer at Little Whale. They are located at 4106 El Camino Avenue in Sacramento. You can find them at littlewhaleswim.com or call at 916-790-5945. Why do you not have to worry about the cold? Because it's an indoor facility. That's right. And a good one at that. That means you're going to have a nice warm pool. They specialize in babies and younger children, but there are adult classes as well. Again, I would encourage you, go to the website for the story on Anya Hall. You can go to episode number 6. Again, a big thank you to our big 3 featured right here on Experience the Buzz. Now let's get back to our conversation.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back. Jon Root is with us. It is episode 107, and we are saying goodbye to the year 2022. And so great, such a great segment, that first segment, in talking about just really what Jon is doing and what he stands for and everything. And, listen, I've done an episode on my own faith journey, right? And that's a big, big part of what I do and why I do it. And Jon really steps up to the plate in that way as well. I think that's why I just kind of aligned with him, just in the sense that, I wanted to be a broadcaster. Didn't work out, but I had a great run. Working with 1240 KSAC. You may remember that station. Then on to Sports 1140. I had the opportunity to work with the Sacramento Kings at the peak of their existence, right? Back in those early 2000s and stuff. And so that part of my journey was great, but I always believed that God steered me a different direction, was able to be a teacher, and now as an entrepreneur, just doing things such as this, the podcast, which, by the way, came out as a result of the pandemic. Right? I'm sitting thinking, man, what can I do? And I love broadcasting. And then I heard a couple podcasts, and then boom, here we are 107 episodes later. So it's great to be able to talk to people like Jon. And Jon, as I mentioned, is a local. He went to Oro High School. Family lives here in Northern California. And we were talking about your show Breakaway and stuff, but you've kind of pivoted and everything. Pivot's a big word coming out of the pandemic. And maybe you can talk about that, because now I know you're kind of, looking more at your individual content, which it can be found on Instagram. Maybe not with all the lights and stuff, but I'll tell you, Jon, Gary Vaynerchuk said one thing: don't worry about that stuff, just put the content out there. That's always the big thing. I try not to worry about production, so I hopefully you could take that with you as well.
Yeah, Gary Vee, content. That's all this guy focuses on. Like, obviously there's got to be some quality to it. I know Gary Vee says the same thing, but yeah, it's been a little bit of a transition period, a little bit of a turning point, if you will, with the way I'm going about covering sports. I just feel like we built some great stuff at Turning Point USA with Breakaway. It was an original idea that I came up with. It was all about breaking away from the mold, established in sports media, have some conversations like we talked about in the first segment, like actually maybe get to these points where we can agree to disagree. And then I was able to have amazing conversations with people, like especially Enes Kanter, like Enes Kanter Freedom, about what he stood for. And man, like, dude, he went against the giant. Like, if anybody's going to be the Muhammad Ali of our generation, it's going to be Enes Kanter Freedom. Like, he actually lost something. Like, there's so many other people. Like, LeBron James is not our Muhammad Ali of our generation. He hasn't lost anything. And people need to realize that when you start talking about certain things, and if you have the majority that is just like, that doesn't want to cancel you or doesn't want to silence you, think about that. Like, Enes Kanter Freedom actually lost his job in the NBA. And then you now have, like, there's times where it's like Kyrie Irving, I'm not going to align with him completely with things. And then think of what you want about him just simply sharing a screenshot of a documentary that was on Amazon. But, like, dude, he lost, millions of dollars because he didn't want to get the vaccine. And he's lost millions of dollars because Nike decided to drop them, as if Nike is some morally superior company that really cares about, while they got sweatshops that make LeBron shoes overseas and they have their top dog over there. It says we're a company of and for China. But, like, these are the kind of conversations, even what I'm saying right here, you won't hear from other people. And this is not me just like that, just yelling at the cloud situation. It's like, no, here's the truth about this other side of the argument. And how do we make a way forward? Because I hate that LeBron is constantly brought up, but I know we brought him up first segment, and you talk about education. Like, remember when he told Daryl Morey, you need to educate yourself on China, and that was the free Hong Kong movement. And then now people need to do a little bit of research, and then actually everybody look up Tencent, Tencent. Okay. That is the broadcast provider in that the NBA is aligned with. People have to remember there are billions of people compared to the hundreds of millions of people in America. There's billions of people in China. That is a massive, massive market. And they've decided to bow down to the CCP. And that broadcast provider out there, they decided that they weren't going to broadcast Boston Celtics games because Enes Kanter Freedom was speaking out against these kind of things. Like, these are the conversations that need to be had. What about the Panthers? They had a trans cheerleader and things like that. Like, these are conversations like, why is this being pushed? Like, why can we have like a massive Pride night that's not just turned into, oh, people just want to celebrate marriage equality for whatever that looks like in the world or America. Now it's turned into, you have the Detroit Tigers last year, that part of your ticket proceeds could go to LGBTQ affirming organizations that performed gender mutilation surgeries on minors. Like, these are conversations like, why is this not brought up? Like, it might make people squirm when we even talk about this now, but it's like, why is this not even a conversation? Like, we are now letting our sports proceeds go to organizations that are harming kids. And sports are supposed to be about, actual like equality when it comes to, going to a game and being able to access that game. Obviously, sometimes tickets are going to be more expensive, and that's the way it is. But there's times where it's like, I thought we were supposed to be bringing communities together, bringing the world together, and then celebrating meritocracy. It's turned into this hyper-politicized, ultra-left political swing that is really hurting people. And then if you're on the other side of the argument, all they do is silence you. That was a big part of my platform when I built it with TPUSA, and then now individually. YouTube, it's going to be a big year for me. It's going to be a lot of learning, but I definitely want to cover some more of these things online for people, as well as what I do on Instagram.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep going back. There just needs to be conversations because, wow, I just think of I think of America just as a whole. It's like they probably know these things, but I think the easy thing to do is just dismiss it. Just dismiss it like, it's not there. Like the China thing. Like, I think I would think that a lot of people, especially if you're an NBA fan, would know what's going on there, the correlation between that. And I think all I ask people, and even for myself, is like, that's the thing, is if I see something, I want to dive in. I just want to do some more research. And again, that goes back to journalism 101. Just do your research, and then you have your opinion, okay? And then I think that is going to be the path of being able to bring people back together, allowing someone like a Jon Root to be able to have a platform to talk out. There should be allowed all of that, just as long as there's conversations and it's not, again, this division that we're experiencing. So, man, good stuff, man.
That's where it's coming to this place, like, Steve, though. Like, I really believe it. I will never, ever get hired by a major radio program
that's crazy.
That covers sports, any team, any league, because I'm going to be called hateful. Because if I talk about stuff, especially about like now protected groups like the trans community, it's like, dude, I went out to see Leah Thomas swim in the national championships, and the conversations I had with people were just they were distraught. And they're like, how did we get to this point? And it's, why can't we even have these conversations? But for me, no, like, I am seen as hateful, I'm seen as bigoted, and I'm standing on truth. But they won't touch me because I think now there's so much legal protection to a lot of these groups now too,
Mm-hmm.
that, like, the way it's set up now is I would be a liability for teams and leagues and networks, and that's just the way our
Sure.
world has shifted. So it makes
Yeah,
sense to me.
the word I've heard thrown around, optics. It's all about the optics, and the optics are not definitely on your side when you're speaking about what you're talking about. And so that was the next point I was going to make is like, does Jon just sit, in a studio and just, spout off things and talk about things? No, the education that he has, the research that he does. But see, I think the third thing is what he just alluded to. He was there. Okay, so Jon actually goes out and he actually speaks to people on these subjects. So he's hit Leah Thomas. He's talked about the major sports organizations, NHL, NFL, the NBA, Kyrie Irving. We kind of hit that. Brittany Griner, which just recently happened. I mean, I don't think people realize, yeah, it's great that she got her freedom, but I don't think people understand what the exchange was for. Formula racing, which is a recent topic you brought up. There's Kanye. That's more of a cultural shift. And then, of course, you got U.S. soccer. So these are just some of the things that hit. But you mentioned you went to the national championship, and I saw those interviews that you did, and it is mind-boggling that when you actually are asking just those basic questions, the responses that you're getting. It's like jaw-dropping.
Well, I mean, I know that people need to be where it's happening. I mean, that's just sports, right? Like, you need to be there. You can be an armchair quarterback, and you be like, "Oh, I can't
Yep.
believe that this quarterback's doing that," or "I can't believe that this outlet's saying this," or "I can't believe that this happened." Like, when you're someone like me that calls myself a journalist, I'd say call myself a content creator, journalist. Like, when I saw the Leah Thomas situation, I was like, let's go. Like, I want to see what it's like, because there's going to be aspects of the event that just aren't covered. Most of the things you're going to see is like, oh, here's this protest, and then there's a counter protest, and then Leah Thomas won here, and then here's how these other people fared in the competition. It's like, no, what was the conversation with the parents? What are the coaches saying? What are the other athletes saying? What are the protesters and counter protesters? How do they actually feel? So, I mean, I had a lot of content that I got from that. Seth Houston, he's a coach for the Rice swim team. I talked to him quite a bit, and that was the first time he had a full length discussion about what was going on here. It's like, a lot of people tried to call him a transphobe, or they like to call him
Wow.
someone that just, like, is hateful to the trans community. It's like, no, this is a coach that cares about the women on his team and about fairness and equality in his sport. If we really talk about fairness and equality, men need to be out of women's sports. It's not fair. And then how does someone compete on the men's team for 3 years and then go over to the women's team and then start winning national championships? Like, these are the questions that need to be asked. Why did the NCAA allow this? What was the feeling in the building? Like, you could just feel like a deflation. Like, you talk about a deflate gate. There was a deflation inside that building anytime Leah Thomas was announced or competed. And I think we were able to cover a lot of good aspects of what happened there. And I think people need to realize some of those stories are even more important than just the things that make headlines. And that's where I really noticed, like, man, there was uh, counter protesters that were on Leah Thomas's side that just could not answer the question of, what is a woman then? Like, you talk about the Matt Walsh situation. It's like, explain to me what is a woman, and explain to me
Right.
why you will never see a woman compete at a high level in a men's sport and find success. Like, why should it be allowed? Like, Leah Thomas, in our world today in America, you can identify as whatever the heck you want, identify as you want, but that does not mean that it's fair that you get to compete in women's sports. And they couldn't answer the questions of, what do you think about opportunities getting stolen from real women? And obviously, you can't have that conversation with someone that thinks that you can identify as a woman at any time, anywhere. So those kind of conversations, they went fairly viral. It got me kicked off of TikTok just for simple question asking. And, even like I wasn't on the ground for the Brittany Griner situation, but can we just talk about the real breakdown of what this exchange looked like? Can we talk about how we have a Marine that's now once again tried to be involved in an exchange, a prisoner exchange, someone that served our country? It was not put in this prisoner exchange with Brittany Griner, and then an arms dealer that sold arms to kill Americans. Like, this person is an evil, evil guy from Russia. And then also too, how many people showed up to Brittany Griner's homecoming right outside of Baylor University? 20 people. Like, I thought she was supposed to be like thank God again that an American's come home, but at what cost? And do people actually really care
Of course.
about this
Yep.
situation as much as the media pretends that we do? If Steph Curry really cared that much and decided that he's going to take the mic for their championship ring ceremony at Chase Center with millions of people watching on national television, why was he not involved in the homecoming? I don't know if he had like a game that night or something like that, but like, why are these people just virtue signaling and not actually putting in the effort and trying to be mitigate this outrage that's happening? It's not going on. But I make sure that I'm doing the research. I'm making sure I'm going to places as much as I possibly can, because I think that just adds to the credibility.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like on the I think people get into it on the surface and then it goes away and they forget about it. And it's like, okay, on to the next thing. It's really made me think about the news and stuff. So actually one of the, I hate, making goals for the new year, but one of mine, I will say, is I'm going to stop watching the news. I'm just going to stop because I think
So
it
you're
just
talking like
enrages me. And
local
I'm talking
or
about on both
like
sides.
national news?
Because I think no, I'm saying national. I'm saying national. I admit I don't watch too much local news. I admit, John, my shift has been to podcast. So I'm going to reliable sources that can speak to me. And here's the thing is that I do want to see both sides. And by the way, my
I love
first
it.
podcast is reading the Bible every day. So like you, my foundation is God. And that's the thing is I don't need politicians. I don't need leftist, rightist, or whatever. Everything for me is the foundation of what I believe in for the man upstairs. I mean, that's all it is for me. And so that's what I try to base everything on. And like you said, at the top in our very first segment, you're not there like shoving it down people's throats. It's just a presentation. It's being able to I can't help it, but that word conversation is going to be the buzzword of this podcast. Is let's get to a place where we can have conversations. I don't mind bringing on someone that would be on the other side and being able to just have that conversation back and forth. But I also find too, and what I've seen is that when that happens, it either doesn't happen. So like debates for politicians, it doesn't happen because it now becomes a strategy. Everything gets away from what it actually should just be for the common man like you and me. Okay. And I'm not trying to spit out rhymes there, but I'm just saying it's just like I feel like those things are missing from what we have here. And so, man, I'm getting fired up, but in a good
We
way,
can,
because I do
but
believe
you
that
gotta.
we can get to a
People just
solution.
have to
I do.
understand that. I mean, just even look at like,
What do you think?
I don't care if you voted for him or not. Joe Biden decided that he was not going to debate. Like, he was not going to come out of his basement. You have Katie Hobbs that decided that when she was running for governor here in Arizona, that she was not going to debate people on either side. She wasn't going to debate Carrie Lake or anybody on the Democrat side. And then look at what happens in our culture now. People don't want to have the conversations because they decide, you know what? You wouldn't even have a good faith conversation. Like, you were just so hateful. I don't even think you could have a conversation. Like, I invited dozens of people on Breakaway. I've invited dozens of people on public platforms to have a conversation. Like, you think you don't like what I have to say about Colin Kaepernick? You don't like what I have to say about this diversity, equity, inclusion in the NHL, and how they think that white people are an issue, the amount of white people in the front office. Like, if you have a opposing view, let's chat about it. But they won't, because I know a lot of people if they have a actual good faith conversation with someone like me, their employer's not going to like it. Their fan base is not going to like it. But like, how do we make a way forward if we don't even have conversations? If you think I'm off base, like,
Yeah.
let's chat. I have a lot of chats offline, and I was like, why don't we talk about this on a public platform? And they're like, no, I get fired, or I don't know how people would respond. It's like, I think people are smart enough to decide for themselves, but now we have so many arbiters of truth. We have big tech censorship in a lot of different ways, whether it's about the a sports conversation that's hyper political or anything. Like, we literally have people have to understand, if we're going to go right or left. I'm not saying the right
Yeah.
does everything perfect, or that they are godly in every sense of the word. No way. But the left is the one that is censoring speech, and they are squashing discussion and conversation. It's just the truth, and people know it.
Well, and that's the thing. I think everything that you're saying is people are afraid to come out and say anything because it's attached to something. In a large part, it's their employer, and it's what brings the bread in for the family. And yeah, that's a tough one. And so it does have to start higher up. It's interesting that you said with conversations. Did you have something a back and forth with Lecrae, the Christian
Yeah.
rapper? I thought I saw something about that. How did that go? And what was that all about?
He's definitely somebody that, like I said, I've been following for a long time, and then I saw his fruit. Like, we're known by our fruit as Christians, and I was realizing that a lot of things that he said he stood for or against just didn't really make sense. So like, online, when you're going to put a tweet out there that says, I'm not progressive, I'm not liberal, I'm not conservative, I'm just kingdom, what about
Hmm.
this photo you had with Stacey Abrams? And this photo with Stacey Abrams said that she's someone that your daughter should look up to. What about you diving into this diversity, equity, and inclusion and social justice? You're trying to say that theological seminaries are uh, rooted in racism somehow. Like, these are stuff that is freely out there, that he's put online. And it's like, tell me how you believe that critical race theory is complementary to the Bible or has any sort of biblical roots to it, or that is going to help us find the equality that you said you're desperately like looking for. Obviously, when there's police brutality, like, let's have the conversation, but stop painting with this broad brush and then feel like you can elevate representation over godliness. And then you have a song called Deconstruction on your album. Deconstructionism is a disaster. People are starting to deconstruct their faith all over the country, and people are deciding that, like, if you are a white straight male evangelical, there's some sort of issue with you or something, and that we need to start having conversations about how you deconstruct your faith within your race or your representation in these ways. And that had some real questions. And then he said he stood by certain things, and then people can see the full breakdown on my Instagram page. And then I've done a few podcasts breaking down what it looks like. But uh, plain and simple, we ended up having a conversation in DMs. He tried to tell me that I need to educate myself, and then if I educate myself, then we can possibly have a conversation. That's not the way things should go. So when we talk about LeBron educating himself, we don't tell him, like, you need to educate yourself about the CCP, and then we can have a conversation. It's like, no, let's have a conversation and figure it out. And there's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. But like, he tried saying, I won't tell people what happened in the DMs,
Absolutely.
but it was a lot of, you need to educate yourself, a lot of, you don't understand the meaning of these words, a lot of, sure, you have your own bias. And it's like, I feel like people just have a lot of questions that you're answering a little bit in the DMs here. Why not come out publicly? Because I feel like he's very cryptic online about stuff. Do I feel like Lecrae is no longer a Christian? No. I think he's wrong in a lot of ways, and I think he's fallen off track, just like Andy Mineo and Tadashi and a few of those other guys within that Christian hip hop circle. But does that mean I hate these people? It's like, no, I just feel like, let's have a conversation. It made waves. I don't really think much came out of it other than, I've really realized that this guy is not willing to have pushback and not willing to have a conversation that people desperately need to hear, but it's also on the back of him coming out with a brand new album, and he didn't want that to spoil. And so it would make sense from a marketing standpoint, but in general, it comes down to it. People aren't having conversations. There's questions that need answering, especially if you're a public figure.
See, and that's worrying about what the world is going to say rather than just trusting God in the moment, because the God is the one who's going to work in that moment. And whether Lecrae knows it or not, he actually could have made that a beautiful thing. Because the other thing for me too is, like you were mentioning, that conversation that you guys were having was within DMs. And I always said things are translated so much differently within a DM or a text. It's got to take either a phone call or an in-person, because there's something about, just the human spirit. First of all, obviously, if you guys could meet in person, that would be first and foremost, because now there's body language, there's interaction. There's so much to be said for that. But that's so hard to do now, right? Like, would you ever get that opportunity? Probably not. Percentages are not good. And so here you are, you're trying your very best and everything. And so he's perceiving.
Yeah, I offered a phone call too. I put that it was like right away. And, like, who knows what could go through his mind. It's like, is this guy going to record this or whatever? But it's like, in general, it's probably going to be easier to be shared if you just put it in DMs, a bunch of screenshots, than what would be done over a phone call.
That's what I mean. Is like, yeah, that easily DMs. I mean, boom, screenshot. I mean, that happens all the time.
Yeah.
A conversation will be better. But you're right. He's thinking about other things rather than just saying, hey, I just need to have a conversation with this gentleman, because if God is moving him in the right way, the Holy Spirit, he's going to realize who you are and be able to have that conversation. And unfortunately, they're just, to me, in that scenario, the barriers are there. It's not going to allow him to break through to ever allow that to happen. So that's one of the things that's happened too. We mentioned Leah Thomas. I know a big thing for you, because you worked for the San Jose Sharks. Like, that was your world, and you were the hype guy. You did it for 5 years. It was pretty amazing. And now with what the NHL has done recently, again, let's face it. Now, when you take the major sports, NHL is probably on the lowest part of the ladder in terms of popularity, right?
Yep.
Luckily, we have something on the West Coast with the San Jose Sharks. I know there's an LA team too, and you have Las Vegas. But I mean, what's going on in the NHL, I would imagine this just kind of breaks your heart, right? That was like your world. You knew those guys. And so now to see what's going on with the NHL, how do you feel about that?
And a lot of these players and coaches and fans don't align with this stuff at all. Like, the NHL was doing a good job staying away from the woke aspect of stuff in the pandemic pretty well. There was definitely aspects that they were trying to push a lot of social justice stuff. I think a lot of teams and leagues felt like they needed to push this and have a BLM aspect. And then a couple of people kneeled during the national anthem. But also, too, there's an interesting connection between Canada and the United States. This is not just a U.S. sport like the NBA has definitely got like Toronto, but you have these other leagues that are basically just America. So you had some people like Tyler Bertuzzi that I thought he did not get enough credit for the stance that he made. He couldn't stay in the same hotel as his team as with the Red Wings because he didn't want to get vaccinated. He lost money because he couldn't play on the road. He couldn't travel to Canada where he was from. So there was definitely aspects of people that had a different viewpoint. They really got screwed over. And I know a lot of people that worked in the NHL or the AHL, and they lost their jobs, or they were forced into taking a medical procedure that they did not feel comfortable with. Like, I definitely know a couple players offhand that I had conversations with in person that were terrified about what their future looked like, because not everybody is like a Joe Pavelski. Not everybody's like a Joe Thornton. Not everybody is like a Sidney Crosby, where they have the ability to probably make a decision that they don't want to get it. I'm not saying that those guys didn't get it, but it's similar to like a Tom Brady. Like, you're going to tell me Tom Brady or Russell Wilson or these guys that spend hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on their body every year, that they're going to get an experimental procedure just so they can play the sport? No, they're going to be able to get away with that. And I don't think leagues are going to talk about that. But there's guys that are just trying to make their way up to the NHL, and they just have to take the jab. They had to do it. And there was absolutely no science behind that working. But the NHL right now, what they've done is they came out with this as a part of their Hockey is Forever 1 month that I spoke about earlier. They had a trans game. So you literally had biological women and biological men competing against each other. And you know what happened? A biological man checked a biological woman, and she got concussed. And this could have lasting damage. Like, they're not meant to be on the same ice together. You're never ever going to see a woman compete in the NHL. It's not going to happen. But you also had weeks prior, which got me kicked off of Twitter for this. Elon's Twitter has been great, but I don't understand why I got kicked off for this. They let me back on, but they put out a tweet when people were just like, why is this even happening? Why are you promoting, they're basically promoting mental illness. Sure, if you want to have a trans league or something like that, but it gets to a point where it's dangerous. And then they ended up doing a reply to their tweet, the NHL did, and said, trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary identity is real. And then I responded and I said, men are men, women are women, identity is a mental disorder. And it's just the truth. And I'm unafraid to tell the truth. Does that mean that I don't love these people? I mean, I feel like I love them enough to give them the truth. I got booted from Twitter for that. And also the NHL decided they're going to turn off their comments. They decided they were going to make that stance that they believe that anybody can be any gender at any time. And that's what they're going to stand on because they want to look inclusive. And I think they keep making these stances. The little bit of people, like you said, it's probably the least popular sport in America behind the MLS of the major sports. It's just ahead of the MLS now. And people are going to start tuning out. They don't care for that stuff at all. And it's sad to see the league that I cared about so much and worked for many years, not just as an in-arena host, but as someone that traveled with the team, put together some high quality productions and told some amazing stories. Like the NHL is tainted, especially when they pulled a lot of this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff. People need to look up that report that they came out with, I think maybe a little over a month ago. They literally had the top dog of that investigation said that the amount of white people in the front office of NHL teams is a problem. Like it's ridiculous. It's eradicating males. It's eradicating white people. And it's not reverse racism. There's no such thing as reverse racism. Racism is racism. And that's what diversity, equity, and inclusion is rooted in.
Wow. So good. So again, it's complicated, and it's like, don't do this with sports, okay? This is not what sports was meant to be, but here we are. And now, Jon, we've done 2 segments of serious talk and very, I think, important discussion and conversation. Again, we'll use that word again. And I'm very hopeful that, if anybody, like, I would have a conversation with anybody. Again, even if it was on the flip side of things, that's the important piece that we want to get out of this. But I do want to say that this podcast is also meant to tell the story of Jon Root. So we really have been doing the serious stuff for the first 2 segments, and that's why I left a final segment that'll be coming up on the flip side. And we're going to talk about Jon Root as the pie guy. We're going to talk about Jon Root leading the zoo at APU and why, I mean, when you find out his story, you'll understand exactly why he does what he does. He loves sports, he loves being an entertainer, and he's got a lot of energy. So we'll take a break and come back with our final segment, the final installment of Experience the Buzz in 2022, right after this. All right, 2 segments down and 1 to go. Let's thank our sponsors. Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with Little Whale Swim School, premier swim school in Sacramento. They are located at 4106 El Camino Avenue right here in Sacramento. You can find them at littlewhaleswim.com or just go ahead and get on your cell phone and call 916-790-5945. It's always summer at Little Whale. They have custom-built indoor facilities, and here's the best part, it's year-round. That's right. So no matter if it's cold outside, which it is in December, right? You can get in there and get a nice, great lesson for your child, for a baby, for grown kids, and even for adults. They've got classes for everybody. It's also a great place to work. So if you're looking for a job, inquire within at Little Whale Swim School. Also want to thank Pit Boss Jerky. Big thank you to Joe Green. He is one of 2 sponsors that have been with us since day 1, which is coming up on 2 years. His story is featured in episode number 26. To get on the order board, that means you want to order the beef jerky. Can't do it online. You got to do it by the phone. Here's the cool part. The number I'm going to give you is the direct line to the pit boss. His name is Joe Green, and that's 916-769-6807. And like me, if you're out trying to get, parts, trying to do some DIY for your home, and you go to a place called Amy Hardware, Pit Boss Jerky is featured there in the 3 locations, 2 that are right here in Sacramento on El Camino, and the other one, which is the newest location in El Dorado Hills. They got amazing flavors, 12 to be exact. I say 13 because they had one that was called White Bull's Barbecue, and the inside scoop is that the company that provided the barbecue sauce moved to, I think he said Canada. That's what Joe told. I don't know. They moved away. And so they've done away with that. And so the final flavor is the one named after this program. It is called Experience the Buzz. Another favorite of mine, raspberry apple chipotle, island teriyaki, keto mix for those of you that like the keto. Good stuff right there. It is great beef jerky, the best. And I'm telling you, I encourage you, get your hands on some, okay? And then finally, I want to thank Troy Rousey, owner of R5 Stitch and Print. He too has also been with us since day one. A lot of the gear, not this gear that you see here today. This is what I got for Christmas. So, but I've gotten so much stuff done by Troy. They specialize in screen printing and embroidery. They have a graphic designer that will take really good care of you. And of course, if you're a company, if you're personal, you need help on a logo, they will do all of that for you. They will create a visual portfolio, which I absolutely love when I'm getting big orders and thinking of different things to get. So again, that's R5 Stitch and Print. You can find them at r5print.com. And you can call them at 916-454-3773. So again, a big thank you to the big 3, R5 Stitch and Print, Pit Boss Jerky, and Little Whale Swim School. Now let's get to the final segment of our conversation right here on Experience the Buzz.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
All right, welcome back in. We're getting back to our traditional style of 3 segments with our guest today. It is Jon Root. It is the final installment of 2022. Want to thank you guys for listening. It's been a scintillating conversation. And Jon, I just love what he brings to the table in terms of his energy and his path. It's very similar to what I went through. So maybe I'm living vicariously through Jon Root. And it's great because he knows my oldest son, Tofu, also attended Azusa Pacific. And we start there at APU. I know you did a lot of work in the media and communications. That was your major. You did the radio station. But what I was really attracted to was the fact that you were the hype man. And this is, I think, where it all begins, right? For the zoo. And APU was a Division II school and had a pretty good basketball team. And so, you took that on. And I'm just wondering where this kind of came from. This was obviously built in you. Was it earlier in high school that this came about, or did it happen when you got to college?
So I know we're going to talk about the Oakland A's pie guy era of my life too. But yes. I think that's kind of where it started. We'll give you the full story about that later. But in high school, definitely I was leading rallies. I loved being in front of people. That's not what I was like when I was actually a little kid. I was actually very shy. I just asked my parents that. But sports, you talk about what got people hyped up. And some people, high school athletics, it's the best time of their life. I mean, I hope it's not everybody's peak of their life, but think of those rivalry games. Think of those think about those Friday nights. Think about those times where you packed and you played your rival, and think about the times when you had homecoming games. Those were a blast, and those should be a big time entertainment era of your life. And then when I moved on to college, I knew that I was going to be playing. At the point that I jumped into Azusa, the next year they were going to become NCAA Division II. We had some really good sports programs, but I noticed a lot of people weren't necessarily engaged with what was going on with sports. So I was like, why is the gym not packed all the time? Why aren't more people going to these football games? And I was realizing through the research I did with other student sections and the conversations I had within the athletic department at Azusa Pacific is you want to actually start attracting more people to your university. Obviously, you're a Christian university, so that biblical aspect and foundation should be first and foremost. You're talking about that is the cornerstone of Azusa Pacific. but sports. Like, we have an amazing football program. I was a part of that, and 2 out of the 3 years that I was a part of that football program, we won the conference. Like, we just jumped in and won the conference. Like, it was unbelievable what we were able to accomplish. But I ended up saying, hey, we can spend a little bit of money about making sure that people understand when games are. And then from there, I'll help create some of the experience. Like, dude, we had some wacky ideas. We had guys, I remember like telling the student section, there's a guy that normally with basketball, you're going to have those calf-high socks. He wore like no-show socks. Like, you never see that. So it looked like he wasn't wearing socks. So we had everybody in the student section take their socks off and then chant socks, 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 like every time that the opposing player got the ball. Yeah, so we just did a bunch of wacky ideas. Obviously, we had our own like homecoming games for football, and then we had a lot of people that would come and visit the school. And those big weekends are huge times for recruiting. And then also what adds to a home court advantage or a home field advantage is making sure that you have a student section that is unbelievably engaged. They are really unique, and make sure first and foremost people know when the games are. There was plenty of people I saw my freshman year. They're like, oh, there's a football game here this weekend? Or, oh, there's a big basketball game? Like, we had really good sports, and we did some wonky stuff. I had a ref jersey underneath my zoo shirt. The reason we called it the zoo was Azusa, A-Z-U-S-A is how you spell Azusa, like you know. And I was a zookeeper, and the people that helped work with us from the inside were called some of our zookeepers as well. And then when I wore a ref jersey underneath my shirt, if a ref was really bad, specifically at a basketball game, I'd have everybody chant sub, 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 and I'd rip my overshirt off, and then I'd be dressed up like a ref, and then I would tell the ref I wouldn't touch the ref, but I would stay behind the black line, so I'm not cussing at him, I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm telling him, I'm stretching behind him. It's like, hey, it's time for you to go. I'm going to come in. And like those elements just really added to the game. And some of our big rivalry games, it gave us an advantage, and I think it added to the hype that Azusa Pacific. At its height of athletics, they still are pretty amazing, but they don't have a football program anymore. But it provided a lot of joy, and I think it was some of the best times of my life leading that student section cool. And help develop what it is today.
Yeah, and I had the timeline wrong, so I like how you kind of dodged that. That was because that was in 2015. They made a run in the playoffs, and we need to throw in there that you played for the football team. You were the punter for 2 years, you said, right?
Yeah, for 2 years.
What was your average? What was the average per kick?
Man, I couldn't even tell you what the average was. I feel like it's so long ago.
Was it high 30s, low 40s?
It was probably like low 40s. Because I think sometimes too, like we didn't really punt. We didn't really punt that much, and I feel like a lot of times too, like when you look at an average, like it could have been a lot of like how many times did you get inside the 20? Was every single punt like did it have to be a bomb? But it was definitely a great time, and being able to play sports, especially after getting a herniated disc my freshman and sophomore year, and then be able to finish out my sports career punting and still being on a Division II team was pretty amazing.
That's cool. And so where I was getting it wrong with the timeline is we heard John mention Pie Guy. Okay, so all of you guys know, those of you that are fans of the show, I'm a big Oakland A's fan. So my first introduction to John actually came at Azusa Pacific in my son's freshman year, of which he graduated in 2010. I think I've got that right. But in 2012, the Oakland A's went on an amazing run in which they were down by, I believe, 8 or 9 games with like 10 or 11 to play, came down to game 162. Yep. That year, I think they had a record. It was like either 15, 16, 17 walk-offs. And this guy, Jon Root, was known as the Pie Guy. And so it was a very big deal. People loved it. Doing the Bernie. I mean, it was just a great year, some great memories. Talk about that character and how you were able to adapt that and how that came to be, and then kind of the life that it took on with A's fans. They absolutely loved it.
So it was about a week before I was going down for football camp at Azusa Pacific in 2012, and the A's are probably my favorite team out of out of all my teams. I know I'm rocking TCU right now. I really hope that they do well in the Fiesta Bowl. I'm hoping to go see them in Glendale. But like the A's, it was the first game I ever went to as a kid. It's definitely not easy being an A's fan, but man, that was unbelievable. Like no one thought we were going to do anything. Once again, we're one of the lowest in payroll. We got just a bunch of misfits on the squad. Josh Reddick at his height, Grant Balfour. Like you had some like really, really wonky people on this team that were able to find a lot of success. And I think the core of that team was so fun. And when you knew that the team is never out, it's like this makes every single time you watch them exciting. And I knew that about a week before I was going down to football camp, my brother and my dad, let's go to a game. And I was a Young Life leader. For people that know Young Life, Christian youth ministry, and a lot of times you have theme nights, so you're dressing up all the time. So I have a costume box, and I'm like, you know what? We just had a walk off the night before, and I'm going to dress up as a baker. I didn't know that I was going to call myself the Oakland A's pie guy or anything. I was just like, and then I wore an apron. I made a paper hat based on a tutorial that I saw on YouTube from like some 6-year-old making a baker's hat. I put walk off, and the A was the A from A's. I said pie, anyone, ? And then I put the amount of walk-offs that they've had. And then I brought a pie to the game. And then I was on TV the whole time. And then I was dancing in the crowd. And then it turned into this thing that I was interviewed by MLB.com. And then they wanted me back at all these games. So I ended up going to like 3 straight games. And then I think for basically a couple seasons, maybe little over 2 seasons, I went to games in a baker's outfit, and I became the Oakland A's pie guy. I was the ESPN fan of the week at one point. And I would bring a pie to the game, just have people come over to my section, and we'd hang out, take photos. I would have 1,000 different forks that people would use to just eat pie. And it was the stupidest thing, but it was so fun. And then I know the A's were always really gracious to me. They invited me to their fan fest. I wasn't able to make that one because I had football I was playing, but it was such a fun time of my life and a ridiculous time. Was able to grow a little bit of a social media following. It was a great way to connect to A's fans. And I think that was a time too with sports that I was like, man, that was the heyday. That was super fun. We didn't have this hyper politicized stuff at all. I was able to just root for my team, dress up like an absolute idiot, and enjoy watching the Oakland A's. It wasn't really much of a joy to watch them this last year, but man, like that was one of the best times of my life.
Yeah, great memories, ones I share with my boys. And I remember when we saw you for the first time, it was like, it was just cool. It just brought a great element to the game. And what I'm getting here is that there's a constant, right? We've talked about the zoo. We've talked about the pie guy. And then that's just what you went into, because you also worked. I didn't realize this, but then I was like, oh, wait, I do remember. You were the in-game host for the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes, which another parallel is my son Toph did 1 year with the Quakes as the announcer as he was trying to pursue his baseball dreams. So you went from the Quakes, then you went to the San Jose Barracudas, and then got in with the Sharks. So this was like a natural thing for you. And I imagine for you, with being a lover of sports, you're like, okay, this is my world. Bring it on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was totally fun. And I think part of it too with the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes was, I had to dress up every game. A huge part of single A baseball is the entertainment. Yeah. So like Cody Bellinger was on the team, so he's been a Dodgers legend since he moved on up, and I know there was a few other guys that found some success in the big leagues, but I dressed up as a guy with a top hat. I had a bow tie, and then I wore a suit jacket with shorts and then baseball cleats. And my alter ego was Crazy J. So like it kind of felt like the pie guy days again. And I was the in-game host, and a lot of people, there was a good crowd for single A baseball in Rancho Cucamonga. And I was able to really develop my skills and in-game host quite a bit. One of the best mascots in professional sports is out there. His name is Aaron Bishop, and he's the the mascot for the Rancho Cucamonga Quakes. Great guy, and he almost became the Grizzlies mascot way back in the day. And like it was such a fun time. It was a great way to start my career. And then I moved on up to um, basically call it just AAA hockey for people that don't know about the American Hockey League. And a lot of it was about entertainment, but I also knew that like I can be an entertainer, but I can also be taken serious when I'm going to put together high quality productions and travel on the road with some of these high profile athletes and coaches. And worked with the NHL for the All-Star game. I always went to the NHL awards. So like everything led from that time in sports where I could just be an absolute goofball, but also be seen as a professional. Like I wasn't just some goofy guy that put on a baker's hat or a top hat and you can't take me serious to cover a sports story. I could have a lot of versatility, and like those days were so fun. And I'm super thankful for my time there. A lot of good people that we didn't have to talk about politics. A lot of good people that were just focused on the entertainment. A lot of people were just focused on the meritocracy of sports. A lot of people that, provided me some immense joy. Definitely some core memories back in those days.
Yeah, and it's funny because with all these stories that you're telling, in my mind, I'm going not at one moment was I asking what side do you believe politically? Again, it was just about sports. And then finally, I want to finish up on the San Jose Sharks because what was cool about that moment was, again, you're in that spot where you're becoming friends with these players. I know you did a lot of work with the players, but you also got to be part of their first Stanley Cup appearance, which in hockey, see, to me, that's when I watch hockey because that when it's at its peak, that I think there's something very special with the sport of hockey when it comes to the championship, the Stanley Cup. And so being a part of that, I have to admit, probably was pretty amazing.
Oh, it was incredible. And I mean, the Sharks were one of my favorite teams as a kid too. I'll never forget. So I was born in '91 when the Sharks started in October. I think that's when their first game was in October back at the Cow Palace. And man, I'm dating myself now. I think I was about 5 or 6 when I got this shark hat, and it had the Sharks logo with lightning coming out of it, and it was my favorite hat of all time. And it was so cool to see, wow, this young kid that just loves Sharks the animal and Sharks the team is now working for them. And the first season I'm with them is the first time that they go to the Stanley Cup, and I was like, well, I got to be a good luck charm, right? But it was a whirlwind for me because I worked for the San Jose Barracuda.
Right.
And I decided to, I got offered that job and took that job because I knew it was an opportunity to potentially move on up to the Sharks because they didn't have an in-arena host or a digital reporter. So I was like, great, this is a great next step from single A baseball, go up to triple A hockey, and then hopefully make my way into major professional sports like I've always wanted to. And, at that time, I actually got to host the Western Conference Final. But for people out there, I did not have that job at that point. I got moved up to the Sharks, but it was a round robin between me and 2 highly qualified women. And I needed to set myself apart. And it got to this point where I did feel like I was the best candidate, but they decided to give the nod to one of the women to host the Stanley Cup final. But I was still able to do some stuff on the digital side and provide some content because the NHL always takes over the Stanley Cup, just like the NFL takes over the Super Bowl and the NBA takes over the championship. People have to realize that the league takes over at that time. It's not the game presentation teams of the Sharks or the Penguins or the Warriors or whatever it may be. Those leagues take over, but I was still able to be a part of it, even though I wasn't on the mic inside the arena. So like people need to keep working, and sometimes you hear a no, sometimes it just turns into like a maybe, or it can be a yes for something else. So I think what I was able to do on the digital side and have some videos like man on the street style content that were a part of the game and the presentation for the Stanley Cup final helped me get the job the next year. But man, that was such a wild ride. I knew for sure the only way that the Sharks were going to have any shot was if they played perfect. The Penguins were just way too fast of a team, but man, like Donskoy's goal to send it to the Stanley Cup final, and like, man, what a magical run that was. And to the tank it's nothing like it used to be. Like it used to sell out all the time, and the Sharks have had some major struggles. Maybe I was their good luck charm and their bad luck charm. So I think, once I left, they started playing really bad. I was like, no, I can't take any credit for them doing good or bad. I didn't.
That's how I felt with the Kings. I felt like once I lost, they're going down the tank. And they haven't been to the playoffs in 16 years, so there you go.
This could be their year, though. This could be, but people have to understand that, like Steve and I, we bring a lot of good luck to these teams. I don't know why that wasn't such a factor, but it was such a blessing to be a part of that. And like, man, I'll tell you what, I look back sometimes at videos when my family got to go, ice level or like behind the scenes and high five the players, and I took some friends there, and then. I made some lifelong friends with some of the players and coaches and staff, and some lifelong memories that I'll never forget. And that's the beauty of sports. Sports are absolutely incredible. What do you want to do during this holiday season? You want to go to the Golden One Center and just watch the Kings. Hopefully they can put together a good little run and finally make the playoffs. You want to just go to a Sharks game, and no matter – sometimes people go to a game and they're like, I don't even remember what the score was, but I remember how I felt. And that's how I'll look back with a lot of games. Obviously remember the comeback against the Vegas Golden Knights. But I definitely know 100% that no matter what the score was, no matter what the record was, I remember how I felt. And I felt a lot of joy and unbelievably blessed to be a part of that team for that long.
Such a good way to kind of bring everything to a close. I mean, such a great conversation. We've hit it all. This last segment, a lot of fun. And the last part, with being an entrepreneur, because that's really kind of what the show is about, is, telling the story. You shared what has been an incredible journey, still being able to do what you love. But tell us what is on the horizon. You had mentioned YouTube. You're making a shift now. How can people find you? What are the best ways to find you? And what are the projects that you have ahead?
So I'm definitely going full speed ahead with YouTube this next year. Will I know exactly what I'm doing? No, but it's going to be a good learning process. And I think if we're talking about entrepreneurs, sometimes you just need to take the step. And enough with the analysis paralysis. Like people right now, they enjoy content that doesn't need to be 4K. If there was anything good that came out of the pandemic, it was the fact that people just want raw, real, authentic. As long as, obviously big tech will allow it. I'm on Twitter right now. It's at Jon Root _ JONNYROOT. The same for Instagram. And then with YouTube, I'm going to start really covering a lot of these sports stories, like the Brittany Griner situation. Like, what does this exchange really look like? What does this mean for America? What does this mean for the sports world? How is the sports world reacting to it? What's going on with Kyrie Irving? What's going on with Enes Kanter Freedom? What's going on with, the new push the NFL is doing right now, the Inspired Change initiative? Like, where is this money going? What does it mean to put equity on a shirt or a hat? What does equity actually mean? Like, start having more of these conversations, and then having some fun too, because sports are a blast. So like, I'll be able to talk about what's going on with like sports betting. I'll talk about what's going on with my fantasy team, why I get way too upset about how bad my teams are doing. I'm going to be in the third place game for 3 of my leagues. I just couldn't make my way to the championship. But there's so much that needs to be covered, and there's ways that we can cover sports where we can have a really good time and have real fruitful, good conversations, because you're just not going to hear that from ESPN. You're not going to hear that from other major sports media members, because either they're too afraid to get canceled, or they're too afraid to actually open up their mind to the other side of the argument.
Love it, love it, love it. And Jon, we'll put all your information definitely in the show notes. I want to thank you for taking the time for this conversation. It's been a great one, and it's great to just visit and get to know more about you, and of course be able to allow you to just share kind of what you've been doing. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all I got for now. Talk to you next time. Goodbye, everyone. Well, there you have it. Wow. 2022 in the books. Great conversation in episode number 107. Big thank you to Jon Root for coming on and sharing his story. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. That's the great part is, yes, I'm the host of the program, but like you, I get to go along the journey with these people that we bring on and really hear their story. These are conversations that I just love having, and being able to have this kind of format just kind of brings it to life. So again, I hope that's doing the same thing for you, whether you are listening to it on the podcast on Apple or Spotify or Google, or on the website buzzardball.com, or you're checking us out on our YouTube channel, which you can find at Experience the Buzz. So we say goodbye to 2022. Of course, get ready and very eager to ring in the new year of 2023. It's a good time right now, obviously, to sit back and reflect. You probably had that happen during Christmas time as your family was around, and hopefully things were great for you. And now it's time to set our sights on a new year, right? Now, with setting new goals, yes, it's great to set those new goals, but don't hesitate, right? Like, you could set them today. You could start it today if you wanted to, but I'll leave that up to you. And again, we'll come back with another episode of Experience the Buzz. My name is Steve Buzzard. That's all I got for now. Thank you for listening. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you for joining Steve this week on Experience the Buzz. Steve would love to hear from you. Leave a review or contact Steve directly with any questions at scbuzzard@gmail.com. To see the other adventures of Steve Buzzard, be sure to visit buzzardball.com.